The sunlight felt warm on my face as I hit the post button. The picture was simple: 2 wooden chairs on the porch of my very own lake house, with a caption that read, "Home, finally." For a moment, everything was quiet. I took a deep breath of the fresh, pine-scented air. Then, my phone started to buzz. It wasn't a gentle notification, it was a frantic, angry vibration that made the small wooden table tremble. One message after another flooded the screen. A waterfall of panic from the family I thought I knew. My brother's birthday text was the first to arrive. Not to wish me well for my own birthday, which was today, but to ask how I could possibly afford a lake house without telling them. My mother's message was simpler, colder, and it cut right to the bone: "You've ruined us." I watched the screen light up with their fury, and I felt nothing but a strange, hollow calm. They had no idea. They saw the house, the sudden proof that I had a life they knew nothing about, and thought I had stolen something from them. The truth is, they were right. I had stolen my life back. They had no idea that the money for their safety net, their comfort, and their son's lavish life was the very thing that built these walls. Before I show you the years of ignored birthdays that paid for every single nail, welcome to Granny's Secret. If you believe in stories about a person finding their worth, take a moment to subscribe. Now, let's talk about what they didn't know. This story doesn't start with this house. It starts years ago, with a history of being overlooked, of being the quiet, reliable foundation they all stood on without a second thought. It starts with a long line of birthdays where I was made to feel invisible. To understand how we got here, we need to go back. Let's talk about the year I turned 32, and the cake I had to bake for myself. That cake for my 32nd birthday. It wasn't the first time I'd celebrated alone, and it wouldn't be the last. It was just a symbol of the role I had in my family. I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was a utility. I was the load-bearing wall in the house of their dreams, invisible, taken for granted, and expected to stand firm while they painted their own lives in bright, vibrant colors. They never once stopped to think that the wall might be cracking under the pressure. To them, I was just there, reliable, sensible, and that sensibility, that reliability, was a resource they were more than happy to drain. It started long before that birthday. The pattern was set years earlier, at a big family dinner. My brother Leo, who was always chasing some new, exciting dream, stood up and made a grand announcement. He wasn't going to be a photographer anymore. Now, he was going to open a microbrewery. My parents' faces lit up like a festival. They saw vision. They saw passion. They saw a brilliant son whose name would be on bottles of craft beer. They toasted to his future, to his courage, their voices bubbling with pride. I remember smiling and raising my glass, but a cold knot was already forming in my stomach. I knew what was coming next. A week later, I was sitting not at a celebratory dinner, but in the stale, air-conditioned quiet of a bank. The loan officer, a man with tired eyes, laid the papers out between us. My brother's dream, it turned out, required a CO signer. Leo's credit was a mess of late payments and small debts from his previous artistic ventures. My credit, on the other hand, was perfect. I'd worked at the same accounting firm for years. I paid my bills on time. I was stable. I was the rock. "It's just a formality," my dad had said, clapping me on the shoulder. Just to get him started. But as I looked at the numbers on that page, the zeros stretching out like a long dark road, I knew it wasn't a formality. It was a chain. I was chaining my future to my brother's whim. My own quiet dream, the one I'd mentioned to my mom just a few months prior, about opening a small cozy bookstore, had been dismissed in an instant. "Oh, honey," she'd said with a little laugh, "that's sweet, but it's too risky. No one reads anymore." Her voice was gentle, but the message was clear. Leo's dreams were investments, mine were frivolous hobbies. I sat there in that sterile bank office, the cheap pen feeling heavy in my hand. I could hear my parents' proud voices in my head. I could see Leo's excited face. Saying no would have meant shattering their world. It would have made me the villain, the one who stood in the way of greatness. So I took a deep breath that tasted like recycled air and paperwork, and I signed my name. My signature, clear and steady, right next to his. In that moment, my perfect credit score, my years of careful planning, stopped being mine. It became another brick in the foundation of his dream. A foundation he would never even see. That was the financial part. But they took more than just my money, more than my signature. They took my time. They took my milestones. My 30th birthday is a memory I've tried to bury, but it always finds a way to surface. It was a Saturday, and I'd allowed myself a little flicker of hope. I'd hinted to my mom that I'd love a simple dinner, maybe at that little Italian place downtown. Just the family. Something quiet. The phone call came that morning. It was Leo. "Clara, you're a lifesaver," he started, his voice already buzzing with energy. "I know it's your birthday, but I'm in a huge jam. I have to be out of my apartment by tonight, and I can't afford movers. Can you help?" My heart sank like a stone. "Today, Leo? It's my 30th. I know. We'll celebrate after, I promise." "It won't take long." I wanted to say no. For the first time in my life, I wanted to scream, "No, it's my day." But the guilt was already creeping in, that familiar heavy blanket. I knew what would happen. My parents would call next, telling me how much Leo needed me, how I was so good at organizing things, how family helps family. The path of least resistance was, as always, to just give in. So I spent my 30th birthday hauling heavy, sweat-stained boxes down 3 flights of stairs. The cardboard edges dug into my arms, and my back ached with a deep, grinding pain. I could hear Leo in the living room, laughing with a couple of his friends, directing traffic while I did the heavy lifting. "You're so helpful, Clara," my mom said when she dropped by for an hour, not to help, but to supervise. She beamed at me, genuinely proud. She didn't see a daughter whose milestone birthday was being erased. She saw a useful tool, working exactly as intended. By the time we were done, it was late. Leo and his friends ordered pizza to the new apartment and cracked open beers. "We're celebrating," he announced. He didn't invite me. The promise to celebrate after had vanished into thin air. I drove home to my quiet, empty apartment, my body aching and my spirit feeling hollowed out. In the fridge was a single grocery store cupcake I'd bought for myself, just in case. I lit the small candle, its tiny flame flickering in the darkness. I sang a whispered, shaky happy birthday to myself, the words getting caught in my throat. I blew out the candle and took a bite. The frosting was too sweet, and it tasted like loneliness. The contrast between his life and mine was never clearer than during our birthdays, which were only a week apart. For Leo's 28th, my parents threw a backyard barbecue of epic proportions. They rented tables, hired a caterer, and even got one of Leo's favorite local bands to play. The yard was filled with dozens of people, their laughter and the loud music spilling out into the neighborhood. My brother stood in the middle of it all, a king in his court, soaking in the attention. My parents watched him with a kind of adoration, their faces glowing with pride. A week later, it was my turn. I didn't expect a band or a catered affair, maybe just that quiet dinner. Instead, my parents met me after work and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a $25 gift card to Walgreens. "We're just so exhausted from Leo's party," my mom said with a tired sigh, as if the fun he'd had was a burden she'd carried. "You can get yourself some makeup or something nice." I remember just holding that little piece of plastic in my hand. It felt cold and impersonal. It wasn't about the money. It was about the complete and utter lack of thought. It was the emotional equivalent of leftover scraps. His birthday was an event that required weeks of planning and a small fortune. Mine was an afterthought, a chore to be checked off with a gift card from the pharmacy down the street. That night, I used it to buy toothpaste and laundry detergent. It felt fitting. My celebration was just another errand, another practical task in a life that seemed to be made up of nothing else. Things only got worse. The family credit card, which was in my name for the good interest rate, started to have a mysteriously high balance. It was for emergencies, they'd said, but the emergencies started looking a lot like plane tickets and fancy dinners. The final straw was a $2,000 charge from a resort in Thailand. When I asked about it, my dad just shrugged. Leo needed a break, he said. He was feeling creatively blocked. So I did what I always did. I took on more work. I picked up a weekend job at a retail store, folding sweaters and stocking shelves under harsh fluorescent lights. My life became a monotonous cycle of my boring desk job during the week and the tiring retail job on the weekends. My alarm would go off at 5:30 in the morning, and the sound felt like a physical blow. I'd pour coffee into a travel mug, my face pale and tired in the reflection, and head out into the dark. I was constantly exhausted. I felt like I was running in place, my legs burning with effort, just to pay for a vacation I never took. My lost weekends, my aching feet, they were all being converted into my brother's creative inspiration, which brings us to my 35th birthday. I went to my parents' house that evening, with that same stupid flicker of hope that I could never quite extinguish. Maybe this year, a milestone year, would be different. But the house was quiet. There was no cake, no presents on the table. My parents and Leo were sitting in the living room with serious expressions on their faces. They looked at me as I walked in, and my heart began that familiar slow descent into my stomach. This wasn't a celebration. It was an intervention. My mom gestured for me to sit down. "Clara, honey," she began, her voice soft and careful. "We have a bit of a family problem." Leo leaned forward, his eyes shining with that familiar selfish excitement. "I have an amazing opportunity," he said. "A 6-month music residency in Austin. It's a huge deal. The only thing is, I need a place to store my stuff, and I can't afford my car payments while I'm gone and not working." I just stared at him, waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. "So," my dad said, jumping in, "we figured you could clear out your spare room for his things, and you could just cover his car payments while he's gone. It would be a huge help." They weren't asking. They were telling me. They were presenting me with a bill for my brother's next adventure, and they were framing it as my birthday gift to the family. I was speechless. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Finally, Leo let out an impatient sigh. "Look, Clara, it's just car payments. It's not like you have anything exciting going on. What else are you spending your money on? This residency could be my big break." His words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. "It's not like you have anything exciting going on." He had distilled my entire existence down to a single dismissive sentence. My life, my work, my quiet sacrifices, they were all just empty space he could fill with his needs. My mother, instead of defending me, just nodded. "He's right, honey," she said, her voice laced with that infuriatingly gentle tone. "We have to support the artists in the family. You've always been our rock, we're counting on you." Happy birthday, by the way. That was it. That was the moment the final crack appeared in the foundation. Happy birthday. My gift was another burden. My celebration was being erased to make room for his dream. I looked at the three of them, my mother, my father, my brother, and the years of resentment and quiet pain suddenly cooled into something else. It wasn't anger. It was clarity, a terrifying crystal-clear clarity. They didn't even see the irony. I saw my 30th birthday spent hauling his boxes. I saw my signature on his massive loan. I saw my weekends spent folding sweaters to pay for his vacation. It was never going to end. This wasn't a family. It was an ecosystem, and I was the soil they were stripping of nutrients, season after season, expecting me to keep giving forever. In that silent, brightly lit living room, I finally realized, a field that is never replanted will one day turn to dust. My own hands were the only ones that could save me. I didn't storm out of their house. I didn't yell or cry. I simply stood up, the words "Happy Birthday" still hanging in the air like a bad joke, and I walked out the door. That feeling of clarity I'd found in their living room wasn't hot with anger. It was as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that something had broken for good. My own hands were the only ones that could save me, but as I drove away, my hands on the steering wheel felt weak and useless. I felt hollowed out, like a house that had been emptied of everything that mattered. I ended up at a park a few miles away, the same one my dad used to take me to when I was a little girl. I sat on a wooden bench and just watched. The world kept moving, bright and alive all around me. I heard the joyful shrieks of children on the swings, the distant barking of a dog playing fetch, the soft murmur of a couple walking hand in hand. It was a perfect sunny afternoon, filled with the simple, beautiful moments of lives being lived. And I felt like a ghost watching it all from behind a pane of glass. My family wasn't just overlooking me anymore, they had made my entire life a waiting room for theirs. I sat there for what felt like hours, not feeling sad, not even feeling angry, just empty, numb. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy sense of dread. I had a meeting scheduled that I'd made months ago, a consultation with a financial advisor named Anita. I'd booked it on a whim, a tiny, secret act of rebellion, a what-if moment. Now, it just felt like another chore. I was going to go in, tell her my situation had changed, and cancel whatever foolish plans I'd been dreaming of. I was going to retreat, go back to my life of being the family rock, because it was all I knew how to be. Her office was the complete opposite of my family's cluttered, emotionally charged home. It was clean, modern, and quiet, smelling faintly of coffee and professionalism. Anita was a sharp, kind-faced woman who didn't waste time. She shook my hand and got right to it. "So," she said, pulling up my file, "let's talk about your future." And then she made the simple, devastating mistake of asking, "But first, how are you doing today?" I don't know what happened. Maybe it was her direct, open expression. Maybe it was the fact that she was a total stranger. But the dam I'd been holding inside me for 35 years didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The whole story just poured out of me in a quiet, steady stream of words. I told her everything: the business loan, the 30th birthday spent hauling boxes, the pharmacy gift card, the weekend job to pay for a vacation I never took. I told her about yesterday, about being handed my brother's car payments as a birthday gift. For the first time, I said it all out loud, and the story sounded even more ridiculous, even more painful than it had inside my own head. When I finished, I felt raw and exposed, waiting for her to give me a pitying look or some useless platitude. She did neither. Instead, her expression became firm, almost angry on my behalf. She was silent for a moment, and then she turned her computer monitor towards me. "Okay," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "Let's forget the feelings for a second. Let's look at the data." On the screen was a spreadsheet. It was my life in numbers, my salary, my savings, and then another column, money diverted. She had calculated the loan payments I'd covered, the credit card debts I'd paid off, the estimated cost of my free labor. The number was staggering. It was a down payment on a house. It was a new car. It was a life I hadn't lived. "Kara," she said, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its edge. "You have single-handedly financed your brother's entire adult life while building a 6-figure nest egg for yourself. They don't see you as their rock, they see you as their quarry. A resource to be mined until it's empty." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "The question isn't, can you afford to leave? The question is, can they afford for you to stay?" Her words hit me like a lightning strike. The numbness that had surrounded me for the last day finally shattered, and something new rushed in to fill the void, a cold, powerful resolve. Anita wasn't done. With a few clicks, she brought up another document. It was a mortgage pre-approval letter. The number at the top made me gasp. It was more than I'd ever thought possible. "This is what you've earned," she said simply. Then, she opened a real estate website. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing in a few words. "Just for fun," she said with a small smile. She typed lakefront property. And there it was. A picture of a small, charming cottage with a wooden porch, surrounded by trees, overlooking a serene blue lake. It wasn't a mansion. It was perfect. It was quiet. It was peace. And it wasn't a dream anymore. I saw the price. I saw the pre-approval letter. It was a number. It was a plan. She wasn't telling me I deserved it. She was showing me I had earned it. All those lonely birthdays, all those extra shifts, they weren't just sacrifices, they were investments. And this little house on the lake wasn't an escape. It was a return. My return. My sadness, my resignation, it all burned away, leaving something hard and clear in its place. I pointed at the screen. My hand wasn't shaking. "That one," I said, my voice steady for the first time in forever. "Let's find out about that one." My new life had just begun. My new life didn't begin with a celebration. It began with a plan. Leaving Anita's office that day, I didn't feel giddy or euphoric. I felt like a general preparing for a long, quiet campaign. The anger and sadness had been burned away, leaving behind a core of cold, hard purpose. For the first time, my path forward was clear, and it was a path I would walk alone for myself. The battle wasn't going to be loud and confrontational. It would be a silent, systematic dismantling of the prison I had allowed them to build around me. The first step was the house. The process was a blur of paperwork and phone calls, but I moved through it with a focus I hadn't felt in years. I remember the day of the closing, sitting in a sterile office that smelled of toner and ambition. I was handed a thick stack of papers, a mountain of legal jargon and binding promises. For a moment, a flicker of the old fear returned. But then I looked at the pen in my hand. It was just an instrument, but it felt like a sword. I thought of my brother's business loan, of the signature I'd given away so easily. This time, my signature wasn't for someone else's dream. It was for mine. I signed my name on every line, my handwriting firm and unwavering. When the lawyer handed me the keys, the cold, ridged metal felt heavy in my palm. It felt like the weight of my own future. I drove to the little cottage by the lake, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. I stood on the porch for a long time before finally unlocking the door. The click of the lock, echoing in the quiet, felt like the most important sound in the world. I stepped inside. The house was empty, smelling of old wood and fresh paint. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. I walked through each room, my footsteps echoing on the bare wooden floors. This was mine. No one could take it. No one had a claim on it. It was a space that was entirely, completely, and gloriously my own. I didn't cheer or cry. I just stood in the center of the living room, closed my eyes, and breathed. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was home. With the house secured, it was time for the next phase. The financial severance. This was the part that required precision, like a surgeon making a series of careful incisions. I walked into the same bank where I had chained myself to Leo's business loan years ago. But this time, I wasn't the timid, dutiful daughter. I was a client with a clear set of instructions. I sat down with a bank manager, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and I laid out my plan. First, the joint accounts. I had one with my parents, the family emergency fund that I alone contributed to. "I'd like to close this account," I said, my voice even, "and transfer the full balance into a new account under my name only." She nodded, typing into her computer. A few minutes later, she pushed a form towards me. I signed it. She took it back and stamped it with a heavy, satisfying thump. It felt like a gavel coming down, a final judgment. One thread cut. Next was the family credit card, the one I'd been paying off for years. I cancelled it. Another form, another signature, another thread cut. Finally, the most important step. I am currently the co-signer and guarantor on a business loan for my brother, Leo Miller, I said, my voice like ice. I need to begin the process of having my name and all my financial liability removed from that loan. The manager raised an eyebrow. This was more complicated. It involved legal notices and a potential re-evaluation of my brother's creditworthiness. It would take time, but it was possible. She explained the process, the letters that would be sent. I told her to proceed immediately. More forms, more signatures. The final, most important thread was being severed. I walked out of that bank feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't their rock anymore. I wasn't their safety net. I was just me. And my money was finally my own. The next few months were spent in quiet preparation. I furnished my little house, piece by piece. I didn't tell anyone. I enjoyed the secrecy, the feeling of building a new world for myself in the shadows. And all the while, I was planning the final step. I drafted a message, a simple, clear statement of fact. I set it up as an automated text, scheduled to send to my parents and my brother in a group chat. The trigger was set. All I had to do was light the fuse. And then, the day came. My 36th birthday. Exactly 1 year after that disastrous meeting in my parents' living room. I woke up in my own bed, in my own house. I made coffee and sat on my porch, watching the morning mist rise off the lake. It was quiet, peaceful, and beautiful. There was no dread, no false hope, no waiting for a phone call that would disappoint me. Around noon, I took out my phone. I framed the shot perfectly, the 2 empty chairs, the calm water, the sun filtering through the trees. It was a picture of serenity, of peace. I typed the caption, the 2 words I had earned with every lonely birthday and every extra shift. Home. Finally, my finger hovered over the post button. This was it, the point of no return. I took one last deep breath of the clean lake air, and I pressed it. The post went live. And then, I did the most important thing of all. I put my phone on silent, turned it face down on the table, and I picked up my book. I would give them 1 hour. When the hour was up, I calmly picked up the phone. It was heavy with the weight of dozens of notifications. The storm had arrived. It started, just as it had in the opening hook, with Leo. His confusion was almost comical. The texts came in a rapid-fire sequence. Where is that? Looks expensive. Wait, is that a real house? Whose is that? Clara, seriously answer me. How did you pay for this? The entitlement was breathtaking. Not, congratulations. Not, wow, that's beautiful. Just an immediate, panicked interrogation into my finances, as if he had a right to know. Then came my mother's messages, each one dripping with a unique blend of passive aggression and accusation. Clara, your father and I are very confused. You need to call me. This is a very big purchase to make without discussing it with the family. This is family money you've spent without asking. This is completely irresponsible. Family money. The money I earned at my 2 jobs, the money I saved by never going on vacation, by never buying myself anything nice. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Then, the true panic began. A new text from my mom, all pretense of concern gone, replaced with pure, undiluted rage. Leo's business loan payment just bounced. The bank sent an alert. What did you do? That's when the voicemail started. I didn't listen to them at first. I just watched their names flash on the screen, over and over again. Missed call, Mom. Missed call, Dad. Missed call, Leo. But I knew I had to hear it. I put the phone on speaker, holding it away from my ear like it was toxic, and I played the latest one from my father. His voice was a sound I'd never heard before. It was cracking, strangled with a terror that was almost animalistic. Clara, pick up the phone. The bank just called. They're talking about Leo's loan. They said your name was removed as guarantor. This could ruin us. After everything we've done for you, how could you be so selfish? And after everything we've done for you. The words just hung there in the peaceful afternoon air. Everything they had done to me, he meant. Every burden they had placed on my shoulders, every dream of mine they had dismissed, every birthday they had ignored. They had done nothing for me. They had only ever taken. I listened to his panicked, rambling message, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, Just the calm, detached observation of a scientist watching a predictable chemical reaction. They weren't panicking because they had lost a daughter. They were panicking because they had lost their quarry, their personal bank, their safety net. My freedom was their ruin. I let his voicemail end. The silence that followed was beautiful. Then my phone pinged. The automated message I had scheduled an hour ago had just been sent. I opened the group chat. There, beneath their frantic, desperate messages, was my final, calm response. It was time for them to read it. That final message landed in our group chat, like a stone dropped into a still pond. I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear under my brother's name, then my mother's. But no reply ever came. The storm of their panic, their accusations, their demands, it all just stopped. The silence they left behind was vast and absolute. For the first time in my life, there was no expectation hanging over me, no invisible weight on my shoulders. I turned my phone off, set it down on the table, and looked out at the lake. The water was calm, the sun was warm, and for the first time, the quiet didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom. That was 6 months ago. The silence from my family has held, and in that silence, I have finally started to hear my own voice. It turns out, my life isn't empty or unexciting at all. It was just buried under the weight of their needs. I've been discovering myself, piece by piece, like exploring the rooms of a house you never knew you owned. I painted the living room a bright sunny yellow, a color that makes me happy every time I see it. My mother would have called it impractical. I call it joy. I started a small book club with a few women from the nearby town. Once a month, they come over, and we sit on my porch, drinking wine and talking about stories. The sound of their easy, genuine laughter echoing over the water is a kind of music I'd never heard before. These are friendships I'm building on my own terms, with people who see me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. There's no agenda, no hidden cost. Just connection. Last month, I bought a used kayak. I'd always been a little afraid of the water, but I was more afraid of letting fear make my decisions for me. The first time I took it out, my arms trembled, and my heart pounded. But then I found a rhythm, the paddle dipping into the cool, clear water, pulling me forward. Gliding across the surface of the lake, powered by my own strength, I felt a sense of peace and capability that was entirely new. This is what I spend my money on now. Not car payments for someone else's journey, but the tools for my own. I don't ask about my family, but news sometimes trickles back to me through the grapevine. I heard that Leo's music residency in Austin didn't pan out. Without my financial support, his business loan went into default. He had to sell his car, the one I'd been paying for, and move back into his old bedroom in my parents' house. I don't feel happy about it, but I don't feel sad either. It's just a consequence, like rain following dark clouds. I also heard my parents had to refinance their house to cover the debts. They're living on a much tighter budget now. For the first time in their lives, they are being forced to live within their own means, without the invisible subsidy my salary provided. I don't revel in their struggle. I simply see it as a long-overdue reckoning with reality. They built their comfortable world on a foundation that was cracking, and eventually, the foundation gave way. They are just learning what I learned a long time ago. You can't keep taking from the soil without ever putting anything back. Sooner or later, it will have nothing left to give. Looking back, I realize the fight was never about the money, or the house, or the ignored birthdays. It was about visibility. I spent my whole life waiting for them to finally see me, to acknowledge my sacrifices, to value me as a person. But the real change didn't happen until I stopped waiting for them and decided to see myself. I had to become my own priority, because it was painfully clear I was never going to be theirs. They called me selfish. I heard my dad's voice crack with the word over the voicemail, and I've come to realize they were right. I am finally selfish. Selfish with my peace. Selfish with my future. Selfish with my time. I spent 35 years making sure their lives were comfortable, and it took buying this house to realize the only life I'm responsible for is my own. The silence from them used to hurt. It used to be a constant reminder of my own invisibility. Now, it just sounds like the lake on a calm morning. It sounds like peace. If this story resonated with the part of you that deserves to be seen, I hope you'll join our family by subscribing. Thank you for listening, dear. Thanks for watching.